Why, hello, greetings to you, and welcome to our ongoing series of Heilkunst question and answer. And this is, as typical for most of our sessions, it's open. You can join in, you can ask your questions. Whether there's two ways of doing that. You can type in your question into the comment box, right below where you're watching this video, or if you want to just indicate to me that you'd like to come on camera, if there's more of an easier conversation to have than typing it all out, I can send you the link for that. But either way, and if you are not with us here live, you and you're watching a replay, same thing. You can type in your question into the comments, and I'll bring that into a future session. So, anyways, we will start today's session with a question that was submitted to me ahead of time. And it's basically, well, really what I'm doing with this question is I'm kind of amalgamating kind of the most common question I ever get. I get it probably from maybe not 100% of patients, but most patients ask some form of this question at one time or another. But before they become a patient or at the beginning, they're trying to make sense of the Heilkunst and their treatment plan and all this. And the way I would kind of amalgamate these questions, this group of questions into one, is it some form of the patient asking, well, but Heilkunst sounds great and everything, but can it help me with my condition, right? What you're saying sounds nice in theory, and I'm glad you've helped other people, and that's all lovely. But everyone kind of has this same question as I'm saying is, yeah, but what about me? Can it help me? I've got this really unique thing. I have cluster migraines. I have rheumatoid arthritis. I have whatever. Pick any label that you like, and that's the kind of question they're going to ask. I want to know if I can get help. This is a great question because, yeah, theory is no good if it doesn't help people in practice, right? So yeah, I certainly appreciate the gist of the question and where it's coming from, and the general the sense of why someone would ask that. And so yeah, just to kind of take that as a general question, I want to break that down into some parts so we can really come to an understanding together. So in like just kind of starting in general terms, this is kind of what one of the things this question is pointing to is, what I guess you could say a more, a less specific way that question could be asked is, well, how effective is Heilkunst? What's your success rate? How many cases out of 1,000 will be cured under the Heilkunst system. So as I say, that's a little bit more of abstracting the question out to the general case, which is not where people start from. They start from themselves. But yeah, if we put it out to that general case, what's your success rate? Well, I would say in general, we don't keep very highly statistical, rigorous statistics. We just kind of know anecdotally, just from living our practice and living with our patients' cases and everything, we have, I would say, somewhere over a 95% success rate in chronic illness. And that's amazing, right? That's a high number. And I say that quite confidently, like I'm not just pulling a number out of a hat. Like if I think of the true flow of things, the true how cases unfold, yeah, we are definitely in that very, very high percentile. Now, I guess you can ask the super negative question about that is, well, what about the final 5%? Why can't you cure that, all 100% of cases? And the primary thing that really keeps us, let's say, to 95 instead of 100% is something called tissue damage. Now that's kind of there's a generic term that can mean a number of different things, but let's just say our bodies, all of our organs, our systems have a very high capacity for self-healing and even a fair degree of regeneration. Let's even take like the liver, the organ of the liver. It has a super high capacity for regeneration, and then some of the other organs will be lesser degrees, lesser less complete regeneration, but definitely we have always some degree of healing and regeneration possible within us. But what I just called a minute ago that that idea of tissue damage, it's kind of like there's a point of no return. But well, and let's take the most extreme example. Somebody has had some form of amputation, of a limb or something like that. Um, well, no amount of self-healing, no amount of vitamins and all the rest of it is going to regrow that arm or that leg. That's kind of beyond the point of tissue damage, as I'm calling it. So I'm using, that's obviously a very extreme example, but just hold the idea of that in mind. Is, yeah, we have a tremendous capacity for healing. However, there is a point of no return. And obviously, let's even go further than amputation. The even more extreme example is the end of life, right? Death. Like there is no there is no vitamin pill that's going to bring somebody back from the dead, right? They've gone past the point of no return, and we can say, yeah, that's well beyond the zone of tissue damage. That's just, there's no coming back from that. So I'm giving you these extreme examples just to say there's an obvious boundary that we can't, once you're over that boundary, there's no coming back. But by and large, the general scope of healing and all the things we do for for promoting health in ourselves, and all the specific therapeutic things we do in the clinic, like there's a very large range of where healing is possible, where regeneration and cellular regrowth and all these things are possible, bringing things back into their natural function. Like there's a very wide range. So that comprises pretty much the 95% I'm talking about of success, and the tissue damage really is really what makes up the bulk of what's left over. That remaining 5% of incurable, incurability, or just kind of the point of no return, as I'm calling it. So that's just the general concept. We have a great high degree of success. So we're already now beginning to answer the question, can Heilkunst help me with my condition? I've got this condition, I have cluster migraines, whatever examples I gave at the beginning. And generally speaking, yes, we can fully heal, we can fully cure whatever the underlying causes are behind that. Now, that being said, that raises up a broader range of issues, and I'll just kind of mention this in a general sense because I've done many other blog posts and videos on these ideas. I'll link to that in when I'm posting this later on, for a replay. But generally, I just want to give you an outline of those concepts. Is I've been using these examples. I said if somebody has cluster migraines or rheumatoid arthritis or whatever, pick your favorite condition name. The problem, by and large, those labels, those names are derived from allopathic medicine. Now, they have a purpose, they have a certain meaning, they kind of give us a kind of a starting point when it comes to healthcare, but they're actually a very poor beginning to what we really want to do. For each individual case, we want a true diagnosis, that really gets to the root of what's going on. Like when you work just with those generic labels, it's not individualized, it's not very deep, and you're not really getting an answer as to what the real causation of such a condition is. As I say, you get a label, you kind of get into a certain ballpark. It's like, oh, okay, migraines or have something to do with the head, or arthritis has something to do with the joints, or whatever. You're in the right ballpark, but it's doing almost nothing to tell you, especially on an individual basis, what is causing that for the person. So anyways, all this to say, when we get into this whole idea of condition labels, what we call false condition labels, it's kind of a darn poor place to start. As I say, it gets you in the ballpark, but that's about all it does. So what we want to do, as I said, is we want to get a deep diagnosis, right into the roots of the case. And this is individual. Like you can't just say, oh, I have the deep diagnosis for all rheumatoid arthritis cases. That doesn't make any sense. It can only be a case-by-case individual basis that you can get such a deep diagnosis that we wish. So that's the general point. We want individual We want deep diagnosis. We want to get to the root cause, because if you're actually going to solve a problem, um, the worst thing you can do is, I've said this in a recent video, I forget how many weeks ago, the worst thing you can do is suppress the symptoms. That may temporarily look good. Oh, look, the symptoms are gone. I feel better. I'm happy. But once you really understand when that's a suppression rather than a true cure, you've actually not only not solved anything, you've set that patient up to either have those symptoms come back even worse, or they would come back, in a different form, a different part of the body or a different function, whatever it is. But you've effectively set somebody. It's kind of like, let's use the analogy of debt, right? If you never pay your debt, your credit card debt, and the interest keeps accruing, it's like it just becomes like a bigger and bigger and more toxic of a problem, right? As I say, you may feel good in the moment. It's like, oh, I'm living free and I'm running around doing whatever I feel like. I'm ignoring my credit card debt, but that's going to come back to bite you. So anyways, I'm using that as an analogy, but same thing. If you have suppression instead of cure, like if you're starting with those condition labels, as I've talked about in a recent video, and somebody runs off for some suppressive treatment, well, they may feel good for a couple of seconds, a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks, or maybe months. But yeah, that so-called credit card bill is going to come back and bite them really hard. So anyways, all this to say is we don't want to get stuck on those condition labels. We want the true individual diagnosis. And the primary way we even begin to get into a true diagnosis, as I say, I've done other videos on this, I've done blog posts and everything. I will link those up here. But just to kind of refresh your memory if you've seen those, or just kind of introduce you if you haven't, we have to begin with three distinct and three major areas of diagnosis that have to be treated independently of each other, right? You can't, like back to this idea of these oversimplified condition labels. They've kind of collapsed all three jurisdictions into one, and you're getting very little resolution, very little detail, very little clarity, very little root cause diagnosis. Like, you're not getting any of the things that you need and want from a real diagnosis. So the three areas, the three jurisdictions, are quite simply what we call therapeutic regimen, therapeutic medicine, and therapeutic education. So the first one, the therapeutic regimen, has to do, this is the most common sense area. Most people gravitate, they figure this out to some degree or other for their own health, for their own purposes. That's the whole area of diet and lifestyle, being in proper balance, bringing, having all your functions and your organs, all your systems kind of functioning harmoniously and in balance, doing all the things they're supposed to do. And that's regimen. And when that's out of balance, or when that's out of whack, the therapeutic diagnosis and the principle there is just simply, you have to bring that, whatever the issue is, back into balance. If somebody is kind of dehydrated, or they're not getting enough exercise, or they're getting too much exercise, which is also a problem, all the whole range of nutritional imbalances, all of these issues in that first area, they fall under that general principle of balance. If something is out of balance, you gently put it back into balance. So that's the whole range of everything from nutrition and exercise and body work, and even some of the basic level of psychotherapies and all these different things. They're just working on balancing these things that have gotten out of balance. So that's what it is. That's the first area. And any, like, again, back to our rheumatoid arthritis or any given label, that's one part of three that we want to dig into behind the label. If we just stop at the label, we're not going to get very far. So that's one of three areas we dig into. The therapeutic regimen, or the issue of balance, is really kind of what opens up the beginning of this true diagnosis. So the second area is therapeutic medicine. Now, by medicine, I'm talking specifically about homeopathic medicine. This is where we're in the realm of the law of nature, the therapeutic principle, like cures like. That's literally the meaning of the word homeopathy. or the other way of saying it is the law of similars, right? So whenever there's a given disease that's really kind of intruding into someone's natural functioning, the the direct and complete cure of that disease is through this law of similars, like cures like. So this is where, now there's many examples. I'll maybe give you a couple here, but we have a whole range of similars. I don't want to go into all of that for the purpose of this video, but one example would be, one of the things we do a lot of in our treatments has to do with the sequential timeline of shocks and traumas. Somebody's had a car accident, somebody's had a course of drug therapies, somebody has had an emotional shock or a trauma, all these things that stack up in our history, our personal history. Each one of them, and we go in reverse chronological order, we will treat with an appropriate remedy based on this law of similars, so that it actually completely cures and removes that trauma right out of the person's system, right? So now, anyways, I just gave you some of those examples from the timeline. So now this, I say, there's a lot more detail here. I just want to give you the bigger picture here. So now we have our first two out of our three therapeutic jurisdictions. So we have the law of a therapeutic regimen, the issues of imbalance. We have the therapeutic medicine. I just talked about the homeopathic law of cure, or like cures like. And then finally, the third jurisdiction is kind of the biggest of them all, and it's kind of the root of all the roots, right? It's kind of like everything I've already said would not exist if we did not have issues in this third jurisdiction. And what it is, we call it therapeutic education, right? So this is a vast, vast, vast area. I'll just mention a couple of examples, give you some orientation here. But yeah, the basic idea is this is the area where our health gets disturbed because in one way or another, we've become out of alignment with the truth. Now, what is the truth? Well, it's a number of things, but let's even start with the basics. It's the truth of, who are you? I mean that, in a deep sense of that question is like, if when we are behaving as ourselves, living the life we're supposed to live, living in harmony with ourselves and with the people around us and our work, our job, all these things, when we're living in the truth of who we are and what we need to be doing, think our life can flow, versus if we're living in some kind of conflict, either we're pretending to be someone we're not, or we're doing a job that doesn't really suit us, we're kind of, for whatever reason, right, we've kind of bent ourselves out of shape, to be able to do something that we think we really should or need to do, but it's actually really bad for us because it takes us out of the truth of ourselves. And then, of course, there's many physical examples, right? If you're living like in a geographical location that's not congruent with your physiology, some people do better in dry heat, some people do better in wet climates, or all the different examples. Again, this is kind of a physiological truth which you may or may not be living according to. So anyways, I'm just giving you a couple of basic examples here, but it's a very, very vast area with that primary principle of, are you living in the truth of who you are and what you need and what you need to be doing, or is there some form of dissonance, conflict, or other form of illusion that you've kind of accepted into your life? So anyways, that's a very, very basic definition, but it kind of starts getting us to the principle. So now, between all three of the jurisdictions, we can even have a hope, have a chance that we're going to get a true, full diagnosis across all three of the jurisdictions. As I say, when we just started with that false label, cluster migraines or whatever, that gives us almost nothing, right? It obscures the facts that we have to look into all three of the jurisdictions. It doesn't tell us anything about that individual case. It's just a generic label. If nothing else, it invites the whole process of symptom suppression, which, as I said a few minutes ago, is what we don't want, right? It's something that suppression is something that comes back to bite us later. So yeah, those condition labels are maybe a tiny little bit valuable, but in a great way, they're very dangerous. They're very harmful to where they tend to take a patient and their health case. So anyways, now that we have those three jurisdictions, we have the beginning, we can start to dig into a real diagnosis, as I've said. And this is really the big key, to what I said at the beginning, that 95% success rate, we can only get there if we use this approach of true diagnosis. So again, back to the very, very original question, which started us off today. If when somebody asks, well, can Heilkunst help with my condition? It's like, well, yes, probably. Now, the way we get to the answer of that is what I just said. We have to get into this true diagnosis, this deeper process of finding the root causes, all three jurisdictions, this very individualized process, and that's actually what gets us that very high success rate. So, as I said, I've kind of abbreviated a lot of things. I just wanted to give a kind of a big picture here. I will put in links to the replay to where I've talked about some of those concepts of the three jurisdictions and the condition labels and things like that. You can go deeper into all these concepts. But yeah, just to give you a kind of a big picture idea here, and I hope that kind of gives you relatively clear answer, a clear scope of what this is all about. How diagnosis actually works, how our treatment works, and all of that. And I'm certainly open to any further questions, any further dialogue about this. As I said at the beginning, you can type your question in at the bottom, whether you're here live or whether you're watching this as a replay. And either way, I will answer you here live or I will answer in a future session. So I'll just leave this session open for a few more seconds in case there's any question coming in, but otherwise I will see you all the next time. And thank you for joining me today.